And we've already talked a little bit about like separately about the 0 to 10 series, and so that's something that's definitely very exciting. And you mentioned, that the prophecy was never something that was just totally unearthed. And that brings me kind of to a different question, which is, in your in all your books, you include such imaginative, different species, different alien species. Where do you get your kind of inspiration for that?
Well, I think all the inspiration I get, I like to say, and it's true, I like to say it, is that God just gives me this video, this movie in my brain. And from there, I start to see it. And I think the mission that I have is, how do I take that movie and translate it into words that make sense? Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting. So with that same concept, things just actually happen. I'll be writing a passage and all of a sudden I'll think it's going to go one place, but it ends up taking me to something that I really didn't expect. And then it ends up tying back into something else that I wrote before. And it's like, how did that happen? And I don't think I'm a good enough author to do that on my own. Mm-hmm. That's why I say that I believe God just gives me these videos or these movies sitting in my head, and I just have to translate it. And that's really what happens. And it's a lot of work to kind of keep track of all those characters and all the different planets that people are from, and there's
different
cities.
Timelines.
The timeline is a character of its own. So the timeline, I wish I could maybe write that on the front cover, read the timeline, read the chapter headers. Don't just skip into it. The timeline is it's its full character. And, not only inside of the original, book, but all the different series. And it was a challenge because when you get to 0 to 10, it's in space. And so they are not on the same clock that we're on. So I studied, a lot of different things. I looked at different series that are out there. How does Star Wars keep track of time? And they kind of don't. They just kind of ignore time, I think. How does it's just things happen prior to this event is the way they handle it. And then I looked at Star Trek, and Star Trek has a really nice way of handling all their time. You have a star date, and someone understands that star date. I'm sure if there's like a Star Trek, I was going to say geek, but if there was a Star Trek geek there, they could tell you exactly what star date Jim Kirk was born and all that kind of stuff. But I needed to figure out, how do I translate that and map that back to the original prophecy and the pieces that happen in book 1 and book 2. And so I came up with a sector date, because the two places that we really concentrate on is the Sol system, which is our solar system, and then the Andromeda system. So in Andromeda, there's a place that I've created called the Chesarn Nebula. And in that nebula, there's many things, but one of the reoccurring things that you'll see inside of that book is the way that time is kept within that nebula. And there's a thing called the galactic time pulse. And the galactic time pulse was created by a race called the Triani. And they launched it out into space. It sits in a certain sector of space, and it sends out a pulse. And all planets can receive that pulse over a period of time. They know how far they are at any given time from the actual thing, so they can calculate and do some mathematical calculation and figure out what the actual sector date is. And so I started with that, and I was able to map out a pretty efficient way of keeping track of time. Yeah. And it's kind of important in the books, because if you have 3 books that are talking about the different aspects of the same timeline, you need to be able to match up everything.
Yeah.
Because we can't just say this guy is 16 years old and this happened on a certain date. The pieces have to fit together. So.
Yeah.